Everyone thought Judith Durham was the angelic voice that carried hope and joy to millions. In the 1960s, when the Seekers became the first Australian band to conquer the world, she stood at the very center, her crystalline soprano enchanting audiences from London to New York. For a moment, they were hailed as the world's biggest band, outselling even the Beatles in certain venues. But behind the glory, Judith was suffocating. The fame that millions dreamed of felt like a prison to her. At just 25, she stood on stage, smiling as the crowd roared, but inside, she was already planning her escape. And when she finally walked away, it didn't just end her own chapter. It shattered the group entirely. For decades, fans have debated, did Judith Durham betray the band that made her a star? Or was she a woman trapped, desperate to find freedom on her own terms? The truth behind why Judith chose to end it all is far darker than anyone imagined.
Judith Mavis Cock, later known as Judith Durham, was born on 3 July 1943 in Essendon, a sleepy suburb of Melbourne, Australia. From a young age, Judith was surrounded by music. Her mother was an art lover, and her father played the piano as a leisurely hobby. Music was not only a family joy, but also a bond that connected young Judith to a wider world. She studied classical piano, dreaming of becoming a professional pianist. But then fate intervened. Judith discovered that her voice had a strange power. During her teenage years, she often performed at jazz clubs in Melbourne. Audiences sitting in thick cigarette smoke were stunned to hear a petite girl with a gentle appearance able to hit high notes with clear, emotional clarity. But Judith's childhood was not entirely peaceful. She used to suffer from inferiority complex because of her small appearance, sometimes feeling lost in the vast world. It was this sensitivity that made Judith vulnerable, but at the same time, it was also what made her voice full of emotions. People often said that when Judith sang, it seemed like the sadness of the whole world was expressed through each word. Few people know that, in the early 1960s, she had not yet decided to pursue a professional singing career. Judith studied secretarial, then worked at a recording studio. And it was here that her voice reached the ears of those who happened to hear it. That was the first turning point that brought Judith closer to her destiny.
In 1963, Judith Durham came across 3 guys looking for a female vocalist to complete their band: Athol Guy, Keith Podger, and Bruce Woodley. They named the group The Seekers, and when Judith walked in, they found what the world was about to stop and listen to: an angelic voice. Within 2 years, The Seekers had gone from a small Australian group to a global phenomenon. Hits like I'll Never Find Another You and The Carnival Is Over topped the UK charts, propelling them past the Beatles in some of their attendance records. The 1967 Wembley show, with over 200,000 people in attendance, is still considered one of the biggest concerts of the decade. And in the center of all the lights, Judith, in a simple dress, a gentle smile, sang her high-pitched voice that silenced the sea of people. Success came so quickly that even Judith was overwhelmed. The media called her the Queen of Australian Singing, and the Seekers were hailed as the biggest band in the world at the time. But while millions cheered, Judith felt increasingly caught in a vortex. The tight schedule, the pressure to maintain a perfect image, and especially the fear that her clear voice would one day disappear. Fans only saw a shining star. But inside, Judith Durham was starting to show cracks. Cracks that would soon cause everything to collapse. Amid the spotlight, Judith Durham began to feel like a prisoner of the success she had helped create. As the Seekers toured Europe and America, Judith increasingly yearned for freedom, a simpler life where she could choose to sing jazz or gospel rather than be pigeonholed as a global pop star. In 1968, at just 25 years old, Judith made a decision that shocked the world. She left the Seekers at the height of her career. Both the British and Australian press simultaneously headlined, "The Voice That Killed the Band." For millions of fans, Judith was the reason why the biggest band in the world at the time was dead. Inwardly, Judith suffered a terrible struggle. She knew this decision meant losing her shining career, but at the same time, it was the only way to save herself. Pressure from the media, disappointment from the audience, and loneliness when walking alone made Judith fall into dark days. After the group split, she started a solo career, but the halo never returned as bright as when she was with the Seekers. The media kept repeating, "That girl broke the band. That girl left everything behind." And that obsession followed Judith for many years after.
The decision to leave the Seekers in 1968 was the biggest turning point and also the biggest tragedy in Judith Durham's career. While the three remaining members struggled to maintain their reputation, no one could replace her angelic voice. The band gradually fell into oblivion, and to the public, Judith Durham's name became associated with a haunting question: why did she leave? In the following years, Judith pursued a solo career, experimenting with jazz and gospel, the music she truly loved, but her albums never achieved the success she had with the Seekers. Added to this were personal tragedies: a car accident in 1990 that left her and her husband seriously injured, illness and declining health. It seemed that Judith was paying the price for her youthful choices, the price of loneliness and a career that would never return to its peak. Yet, in those painful moments, Judith still maintained her pride. She sang for herself, for her loyal audience, and for her never-ending love of music. She knew she had broken a legend, but at the same time, she had stayed true to herself. The climax of the tragedy came in 2022 when Judith Durham passed away at the age of 79 from chronic lung disease. The whole of Australia was in mourning. The government held a state funeral for her, a rare honor for an artist. Millions of fans around the world paid their respects, and the story of the woman who ended the biggest band in the world once again became the center of attention.
When Judith Durham died in 2022, Australia lost not just a singer, but a piece of its cultural soul. The Australian government declared a national mourning, a rare recognition for an artist, affirming that her voice touched the hearts of an entire nation. People can argue forever. Was Judith the one who killed the Seekers, or simply a young woman who dared to walk her own path? But above all, Judith Durham left an undeniable legacy. With Georgie Girl, I'll Never Find Another You, and The Carnival Is Over, she not only brought Australian music to the world, but also proved that a pure voice can overcome any barrier. Colleagues and friends describe Judith as a kind, humble soul who always saw music as a service rather than a means to fame. And looking back, the public also understands that Judith's choice to leave the group was not a betrayal, but an act of courage. The courage to live her truth, to keep her freedom of soul. Perhaps Judith Durham was not just a once shining star. She was a human being, fragile but strong, brave but troubled. And her legacy still resonates, a voice that will forever resonate in the memories of those who have listened.